Hello, everybody, and welcome back. We are now into our panel session, our first panel session of the day, how to truly humanize customer experience in this age of very predominant AI. So today, joining our panel, we have Sophie Moglione, we have Max Anastasia, Ose Marthinsen, Simon Lang, John Quayle, who we've just seen, and Greg Easton, who we had the pleasure of being with us yesterday. I hope, folks, that I had all of the pronunciations correct there of your names. Please correct me if I didn't.
You've gone for the Italian version of mine, which is great.
How do you say it, Sophie?
Oh, it's my married name, and I married a Liverpudlian, so they pronounce it Moglione.
Oh, that's exactly how I would have pronounced it if I didn't speak to ChatGPT.
No, you went for the Italian, which is much nicer.
I did go for the Italian, but I don't. Yeah, well, okay, we'll just stick with the normal from now on. But thank you so much for joining us. This is such an interesting conversation, and I think it's actually dominated the conversation over the last day and a half. Because, of course, we can't avoid the topic of AI, but we are all seeking to keep it as human as possible. The question is, how on earth do we do that? So I'm confident by the end of this hour, we will have given the absolute answers indefinitely for everybody to keep it human. So I'm going to start, Sophie, with yourself. So you obviously work in large-scale telecom environments. And what I'm curious is, from your perspective so far, where has AI genuinely improved human experience, and where have you seen maybe risks of it starting to erode it slightly?
Yeah, definitely. I think since the emergence of Gen AI, which has obviously been very rapid growth across all industries, we've seen it used in different ways across our company and across the industry. And there are definitely places where it adds a lot of value to the customer experience and places where it definitely does flatten it, as you say. The main point for me is I think AI is about removing friction and not removing the human connection and the feeling. So I think for us personally, where we've seen it really shine is where a friction point that a customer has today, we're able to address it and make it better. So, previously you might have had a lot of information at your fingertips as a customer to try and find the answer to your question. So you might have marketing pages or FAQs or different information in emails. And I think what we get with AI is the ability to pull that information into one place and answer the customer's needs and their questions in a way that is suitable to them. So we launched something called AI Search or AI Assisted Search, which is our help and support function, basically. And if a customer has a question on, what are my roaming options, or how does this pay-as-you-go SIM work, or what is an eSIM, we're able to pull that information from lots of different sources and give them the answer direct to their fingertips without them having to search around. And I think that's a really it helps reduce time to understanding and reduce time to sort of resolution for the customers as well. But I think you definitely see places where it flattens the experience and it's not quite as good. I think where you have very automated generic responses to your customers, where it's over templated and the answers that they're getting lack any sort of personalization or context because you're just trying to do a one size fits all for speed or efficiency. Those are the sorts of examples where the customers lose that connection with the brand and they lose that personalization. And it ends up being the experiences we create and the designs that we have can be quite sort of homogenous, very generic, and you just lose that sort of human connection, which customers need to have that brand loyalty.
Yeah, and it sounds like you've hit on two really crucial key points there, in that if you're designing from a place of customer need, customer friction, customer want, then you're doing something positive. Maybe you're going to get it right. If you're designing from a place of cost optimization, efficiency, maybe not always the case. And I like to think that if you design in the foremost state, cost efficiencies and optimization will come. It will come down the line. But if you're designing with that first and foremost in mind, then yeah, well, you're, like you say, you're seeing the experience flatten and maybe erode a little bit.
Absolutely. You end up incurring different costs further down the line, which, is not beneficial to the business or to the customer.
No, thank you. Max, You're head of design at TSB, and I'm thinking then moving on, building on, in fact, what Sophie was just saying, but from a design perspective, how do you stop AI-driven journeys becoming efficient but emotionally void?
Yeah, thanks, Katie. Yeah, I think just to build on what Sophie was just saying, right? So I think AI naturally, without the right sort of controls and sort of regulation around it, will gravitate towards optimization. So faster, shorter, more automated. But actually, really, what human experiences require are emotion, trust, and meaning. So really, our job as design leaders is to make sure that the emotional quality is a requirement and not really an afterthought, right? So how we do that is we start with the human outcomes. So researching how people want to feel, not just what they want to do. So that means understanding the emotional stakes, the moments of anxiety, uncertainty, what a good ending actually looks like from the user's point of view as well. So targeting the emotions like confidence, reassurance, connection, relief, using user interviews, surveys, think out loud tests to truly understand the pains, the frictions, and ultimately the emotions as well. And for me, I guess from a designer perspective, it's really important for my designers to really engross themselves and build that empathy with those users so they can fully grasp those pain points and emotions. Off the back of that, then you can design and define some emotional personas and not just behavioral ones as well. And then you can start to look at things like emotional arcs, right? So you come from a position of anxiety or frustration, and ultimately you want to be confident, you want to be satisfied at the end of it. So how is that journey gonna measure that along the way? And for me, that's really the only way that we can create moments that matter, right? Is making sure that we have that human connection. And then it comes down to, I guess, then how we refine success metrics. So, like you said, Katie, we're not just going to focus here on efficiency metrics, but begin with how we want people to feel, right? So, AI optimizes generally what you tell it to measure. So, if the KPIs are task completion, deflection, time on task, you're going to pretty much guarantee a pretty emotional follow journey. They're just going to get from A to B, job done, it's over, we did it. But actually, what you want to do is you want to introduce some human outcome metrics alongside that efficiency, right? So, did they feel understood? Did the anxiety get reduced? Did it increase their confidence? Would it build trust in doing this experience again? Not to replace the efficiency metric, but to almost like constrain them or work with them a little bit. And I think also with all of that stuff, you can add in then some purposeful friction as well, right? So efficiency on its own is going to kill meaning. So what I mean by that, some pauses are going to be humane. Some confirmations along that journey are going to build trust, and explanations are going to reduce anxiety, right? So as a general rule of thumb, remove friction that wastes time, but keep friction that builds confidence, right? And again, I guess from like a designer's perspective as well, I'm going to always fight the designer's corner here, but emotionally rich design requires time to explore and challenge assumptions. If the team only polishes AI outputs, you sort of lose that human layer. So it's a case of guarding that space for craft and not just delivery. Like we don't just want to be the ones at the end taking all those insights and everything else and just creating that journey, right? So I guess like efficiency is what machines do well. Emotion is also almost what we design. So our job is to make sure that AI doesn't just get things done and helps people feel something along the way.
It's really interesting to hear you talk about friction there, and actually how there needs to still remain a degree of friction for customers to kind of trust in that process and keep people where they need to be. And I guess I've just got a small follow-on question to that, Matt. But you talked about the experience feeling human. When you're utilizing AI and you've got to find that balance, are there any signals that tell you that the experience feels human enough beyond just focusing on usability and speed?
Yeah, so like I think generally you can feel when something is human enough because people stop fighting or feel like they're fighting the system, right? So it works with them. So like thinking about usability and speed, you look for three main signals along the way. So the first is emotional regulation. So does the experience reduce anxiety or confusion instead of amplifying it? The second is kind of being seen. So does it acknowledge context, uncertainty, or stakes rather than sort of treating the user like a generic sort of input? And the third is like an aftertaste, I call it. So when it's over, do they feel confident and respected or just processed, right? Is it just exercise they've gone from A to B, or do they feel a level of satisfaction or confidence along the way? And those measures are the kind of things that you should look to embed as part of that process. And then really, so the human experience doesn't just help you finish, but it makes you feel like okay or good about finishing that task.
Yeah, and the aftertaste piece is so interesting because there can be so much that happens in an experience, both highs and lows. Actually, to know what that has left, what feeling that has left, regardless of the highs or lows, I think is a really important thing that organisations need to capture.
Yeah.
I'm not sure who it is. Sorry, guys, but someone's got quite a lot of background noise. If you don't mind just popping yourself on mute if you're not talking, that would be super awesome. Right, I'd love to progress the conversation slightly to Osa. So Osa, you're head of general AI at DNB. Now, I'm not actually familiar with DNB, so it'd be great if you could just give a quick little summary as to what you do. But the question I had for you is, when AI becomes embedded across customer journeys, which I'm sure it is being more and more and more, how do you ensure accountability for customer outcomes when it starts to AI?
Thank you. Hi, my name is Åste, typical Norwegian name, working in DNB, that's Norway's biggest bank. So I'm responsible for Gen AI for the personal customer. And that means I'm responsible for the chatbots, how we use it to the customer, and also internal, how we use it for our customer service. Yeah, and back to the question. In DNB, we follow a simple principle. There must always be a human element in every customer journey. So I am responsible for our AI trainers who are responsible for training, validating, testing, and of course we use the data, the insights to improve our systems. And as a bank, trust is absolutely necessary. So it's also critical to find the data across all the channels to ensure a seamless customer experience. So we use, now we are around 12 AI trainers, and that they follow the customer journey, how we use the AI.
And how long has it taken to build up that team of 12?
Oh, someone has been here for many years. We started this journey in 2018 with AI in our chatbots. And of course, that had been changed with Gen AI and also adding on a lot of data and integrations.
And I've got a quick top tip request from you, because I'm sure a lot of companies are starting to develop these roles, new AI related roles, but are early in that journey. So what's a top tip you would give them if you're starting to build an AI trainer role? What must they do first and foremost?
Oh, know the customer. What does the customer need? And I think also the mistake many are doing, that they use the AI as a technology, but I think it's more important to use the data and also integrations. So if you can say shitty data in, shitty data out. So that's more important to see the whole ecosystem. So AI is only a technology that we put on top.
So I know people can come in and learn quick, but it sounds like actually somebody who knows the organization really well and knows the customer really well is somebody who'd be placed in a role like that.
Yeah, I think so. That's good.
Brilliant. Thank you. So Simon, maybe building on Osa's comments just there, I'm curious about actually where organizations should draw that clear boundary between AI support and human responsibility, because it's not black and white, right?
No, it's not black and white, but it could be as simple as Osa just told us. Have a human on top or in the loop of everything can be important. It's not the best cost-cutting case then, but it's a part of how you should, evolve with AI. I think people talk about an automation ladder, and we understand our processes, then we can automate it, then we can build a autonomous agent around it, and then so forth. And that could be a way to go by. But I think there's not a clear line for us. It's about accountability and judgment, and if you have that, and you have that, if you need that for a specific process here, you need to have a human in the loop, and you need to have a human on top of that, and that is how we draw the line. So if it comes to something that should be a judgment or something that needs to be have an edge case or as something that is not normal, then we need to have a human in the loop. And so that is what we are doing. So that is where we draw the line. But it's not just simple as that. It's actually more, because it's how you organized around it, and it's how you understand your different kind of roles you have, and it's also how, as Max and Sophie presented, is how you design the total trust creating journey, if you can say so, because you can do that with AI at some points. AI can be used for transparency, it can be accurate, it can be precise, but at sometimes empathy is maybe not that good, so at that point you might need a human, but you need to design it. That is the case here. That is my case, or my belief is that we need to design processes where we understand what AI are capable of and good at doing, and not be afraid of it, I think. So I don't think there's a clear line. So
no, you just mentioned trust there, and obviously in your industry, trust is exceptionally important. So, and I guess this is for internal stakeholders, your employees, but also your customers. How do you even start to introduce new ways of doing things with an increased use of AI and technology without weakening that all-important reassurance that you have to give?
Yeah, but as I said just before, I don't think it's about that you weaken something with AI. I think you can strengthen it with AI, but you have to be good at designing the process and not the customer journey there. So that is something there's a slight difference to that. But of course, trust is important. I think it's important for every brand and every service. Our name is Tryg, which means secure, safe. So of course, trust is something that we really, and that actually comes to another point, because it's our culture is around making people safe and secure, and so it is also in our customer experience, in whatever channel that would be in, and what we normally do is to we call it augmenting human superpowers, right? So we like using AI. We are not afraid of it. We use it in many processes, but we use it as a platform for the human agent to become even better. That is actually where we started, and that is what we are also getting the best business cases out of. Actually, we are getting better numbers and results out of helping the humans agent in what they are good at. So
And think that's a crucial point in talking about actually the results that you're getting in the business cases that are actually, I suppose, demonstrating ROI or proving value. And I think honing in on that actually is important, because I'm still going to events where I'm hearing conversations that people are reluctant and holding back on AI strategy because things are moving so fast, regulation isn't keeping the pace, of maybe they're just risk averse. So there's so many companies who still aren't on that journey, really. And John, we were just talking about this during your presentation prior to this panel, so maybe you're best placed to answer this question. But from what you said, what is an AI capability in customer experience that you think is genuinely delivering value today, and one that people should be poking their ears up at? And what, if anything, is being oversold?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, actually, because we can say this about any sort of feature and product, but we can talk about what we sort of see in the fields. And for us, it's focusing on well-trodden, well-proven things. And it's not necessarily the big, impressive stuff in a demo that we all love to see, and I personally love to deliver. What we see customers getting the most value out of in CX is things like summarization. Let's look at the cool nodes and let's choose how they work. It seems really simple. We've been doing this in Teams for ages. This is where we've seen significant value unlocked, completely transparent to the customer. And we've also seen this, and you mentioned this a minute ago, Simon, human in the loop interactions. Look, it doesn't have that initial high-level cost saving where you can talk about how much labor you can offload. But maybe rather than looking at how much you can deflect, you look at how much you can offload an agent from. So these are things where we're keeping people engaged, but taking some tasks away, but still allowing that human to authorize it. So we've seen significant gains with customers that have adopted that. One thing that's really interesting about that, if we're having AI solutions feed information to a human agent that's in the chain, we're keeping the empathy, we're keeping that quality of conversation, but every single one of those responses can be rated, and we can see if they're used by that human agent that's there. That's your pre-staging ground for if you do want to shift over to something that's directly interacting with your customers. It allows you to use your own human feedback to start to build those out. And that's where we see that value being added, but we also see it preparing for the next stage, which probably segues into my next part of the conversation of what's being oversold. And one of the things I hate to say this, one of those things is agentic AI solutions. And we've got all these terms, and in CX, we probably think of the word agent and we think human contact center agent. But when we use it in terms of agentic AI, it's where we start to delegate some automatic decision making and automatic calling tasks and things like that. The reason we see this sometimes being oversold is we'll see sort of vendors or customers that sort of been traumatized by every vendor that's come in and said, we'll replace your entire contact center with a virtual agent. The way we're going to show you how good it is by making a phone call, and you'll see it sounds like a human. And we've inserted some, lovely office ambient background noise. You don't expect delay. It sounds just like talking to a person. Let's go with this route. But the reality of it is we are working with, and this is me sort of diving into maybe slightly uncharted territory, but we're working with a system that is non-deterministic and probabilistic in nature. And those of us that worked with Taunge before, you put something in to some software, you get something out, and that's going to be the same every single time. For AI to function well, for it to sound like a human, we have to introduce a bit of randomization. And that means we can almost come down to a predictable statistical level of what our error rate would be. Now, if you hire someone to come and do a job in a contact center, they will say, I will never make a mistake. No one says in an interview, oh yeah, my error rate is about 15% or 3%. It doesn't necessarily matter. But because we know what it is, that immediately becomes something we have to overcome. And when we look at what we think of as AI, most of us, if we think of something in our mind's eye, it's ChatGPT or it's Claude or it's Copilot, whatever we use. That's a massive amount of structure on top of the technology that's actually AI or the LLM. So we sometimes forget all of this stuff, and it's very easy for this to be obscured and oversimplified and pushed into organizations. We're getting there. There's some places we can do it, but I think the hype is really real still at this point.
Yeah, and on that point, I am actually, again, I'm going to events and I'm hearing some companies talk really candidly about pilots, proof of concepts that they've invested resource in that just haven't worked. And I think that's really great that companies are sharing those stories, because obviously this is how we learn. But on top of what you were just saying about maybe agentic AI being pushed and I don't know, maybe positioned not in the right way to companies, are you seeing any other most common kind of, for want of a better word, failure areas?
Yeah, and is this there's two types of reasons we see people. I don't want to use the word failure, but where we see non-positive outcomes, let's say, and that can be a lack of bravery or an abundance of hubris. So there's two options. There is, we're going to be so careful. We're going to spend a lot of money on this solution, but we're going to use it for a very, very tiny, narrow use case that doesn't necessarily deliver value. Or we're going to trust this with everything, and we're going to unleash it to our customers, and we're not necessarily going to control it. And they're those two sides really that where we see that happen. And that's not always the fault of the product or the solution that's been put in. It's often around the adoption process and how organizations have looked at what are their customers actually doing? What do they actually want? What's the actual current problems we have? Why are people calling us so much? And they're the questions that we need to start asking first. So if we don't even get to that point before we make a choice, we're sort of destined to sometimes make the wrong one.
Yeah, for sure. Speak to the experts, right?
That's right.
Greg, on that point, one thing, I mean, we spoke a lot about yesterday, obviously during your conversations and during the panel, about conversation analytics. And I think this is one thing that we know is pretty well established at decent success rate. You know, it adds high value. As AI gives organizations this kind of new unprecedented visibility into the conversations that our people are having, that is one thing. Getting that insight is one thing, but how should organizations be using that insight responsibly to actually improve customer experience?
Yeah, and Katie, as you say, it's something that's very close to our hearts at Tollring. So for people that don't know, you know, one of our flagship products is designed to enable businesses to turn day-to-day customer conversations into actionable insights. You know, these day-to-day conversations that, you know, your agents are having with your customers are generating incredibly rich data, especially voice calls. And transcription at scale used to be very expensive. It was also a manual task to kind of take that data and find the intelligence out of it. But it's becoming more and more affordable. And the power that AI adds is the ability to effectively mine that data and then turn that into intelligence that allows you to remove friction and create better flows and create better products and all of those sort of good things. But where it comes to responsibility, I think it touches on a couple of things. And actually, I think you need to look at it from both angles. You need to think about responsibility towards your customers, obviously, but you also need to think about responsibility towards your staff, you know, to make sure that whatever AI solutions you put into place make their lives better, enable them to work better, to provide better outcomes to your customers, to be more efficient, and all of those sort of good things. And the potential is that if you don't get it right from the start, you could end up actually causing a huge amount of damage. And so if we focus maybe on the responsibility to staff, you know, to give an example of where I've seen this go quite badly wrong, I was in a contact center, a travel agent recently, and they'd rolled out a Gen AI agent assist. Sounded quite similar actually to what Sophie was talking about, designed to provide information to agents to enable them to navigate fairly complex customer conversations where people are looking to buy holidays and provide them with relevant information at the right time. And the expected sort of ROI of that sort of technology rollout is, you know, an uptick in conversion rates and upsells, but also a reduction in agent ramp time. So getting agents up to speed quicker and enabling them to become more productive. But what actually ended up happening was a 35% increase in agent attrition. So they lost agents. Agents left the business because they were overwhelmed by this new technology.
Wow.
There were two key reasons there. One was that in order for that type of solution to work very well, you need to make sure that your data, your knowledge base is well structured so that the AI can make effective use of it and provide information in a relevant way at the right time to your agents. And then obviously you need to make sure that the agents are capable of handling now another piece of information, another input, while they're engaged in the conversation with the customer, while they're in a CRM system, while they might be accessing some information in a website, to now also have an AI agent feeding them information. They found it overwhelming. And so actually they ended up having to scale that right back. So that, that's an example, a real world example of implementing AI without really doing all of the homework in the background to make sure that it was going to deliver the expected results.
Yeah, and I guess it's sorry, go on.
I was going to touch on the kind of responsibility to your customer, and maybe to take a slightly different angle than you might expect in terms of customer experience. It's really around protecting customer data, sensitive customer data, and ensuring that customer data doesn't potentially make it into the outside world. And what I mean by that is, if you're going to develop something either in-house that is a generative AI platform, something like a ChatGPT or a Google Bard or something like that, if you're going to develop in-house, make sure that you're not using a public Gen AI platform. Or if you're going to buy a product, again, make sure you're not using a public Gen AI platform, because if you do start using public platforms, then the danger is there that you're going to lose control of the data. You're not going to be able to ensure compliance. Security is going to go out the window. The reliability and the consistency of the results are going to be variable. So it's important that from a simple product design perspective, you get those little things right to ensure that you protect customer data.
Yeah, I think there's some real sensitivity about that. And I think, again, from conversations I'm hearing, it's often one of the reasons that people are halting at the moment until they've got that regulatory side figured out.
Absolutely.
What I'm thinking about doing now is kind of raising it up to make things a little bit more general across the board when we're talking about humanization. And I'm going to direct the first question to Osa, but I'd maybe love your input if you also have an answer to this, given that you're all from different industries. So have a think on this question. But Osa, the question I was going to ask you is, if any, what is the one top assumption organizations often get wrong when they're trying to humanize AI-driven experiences?
Yeah, I think Greg had a very good example. And I think the biggest mistake is believing that AI is mainly about the AI itself. But the data is so important. And as Greg also mentioned, the knowledge base. We are working every day on that. The knowledge base needs to be structured right away, and the governance, of course. And also, of course, the integration. One example we use is in our chatbot that the customer can order a new card, the debit or credit card. And with the generative AI answer, it's very easy for the customer. But we need the data, and we also need the integration to our system. So it's need to be a platform.
So I guess that kind of high level assumption is just actually what is the, I suppose, main benefit or main driver of AI. Actually, if anybody caught Joy's session this morning, she was first up, Joy Wong. She gave a bit of magic that I'm going to keep with me all day now and hopefully longer. But she'd said there needs to be a pivot. I'm not quoting her verbatim, but there needs to be a pivot from AI as a specific tool to an empathy enabler. And she explained what she meant by that. But once she'd said it, it absolutely resonated that actually the way in which we're approaching AI utilization, we wouldn't even be changing the way we approach it. It's just our mindset around what we think it can do for us. So I guess it's on the same page as really acknowledging the data side of AI. Has anyone else got an answer to that question? What is an assumption organizations get wrong? Simon?
Just wanted to say, because also following up on Ose's AI trainer, it's because an AI trainer is not just a trainer we also call them AI trainers, but they actually do business process design, I would say. They do AI development, and then they do a lot of change management. And that is actually the biggest part of, and perhaps a big mistake is that you forget about your colleagues at some point, because, hey, this is smart, and that's also following up on Greg's story. This is smart, this is fast, you can do everything. We have provided it all, but we forgot about their experience, right? So the employer's experience and how they can manage to talk to somebody, getting quotes and getting recommendation, getting summaries and stuff like that, and still be on top and still be in charge of that experience. And that is also why we call it augmenting human superpowers, because it's so important for us to help the human agents as much as possible, and helping them also transform in this new technology space. Yep.
But when you say about helping the human agent, just in your experience, I know obviously Greg talked about overwhelm, but what, if any, kind of negative pushbacks have you experienced that other companies might need to be aware of and potentially prepare for?
Everything, right? So we have a recommendation engine that we try to that listen in on the calls and come to a recommendation during the call, right? And that is something very intrusive and takes away some responsibility from the agent. And it has to be, and what we have done is that we have included it in the training of new agents, new human agents. So I just think that, and that was my point, and then I saw there was head of design and experience. So having an internal design process is super important if you do AI, and at the moment all the responsibility is within some data scientists, right? And that is a problem sometimes. So if you don't understand the implementation and the change it has to come, it's going to give us a problem. And so you just need the role for that. You need a process to do that, and not just simplify it, as you said yourself, as a specialized tool that you can use. But it was the same when we changed to digital, right? So it has been for many years like this, but somehow we forgot it and forget it all the time when we do change.
And it doesn't matter what the change is, right? You know, we often organizations, people, we all struggle with change. So once it becomes normal and it's part of standard process, then we forget about the integration at the beginning. But change up front is always something that is difficult. And I think obviously this just shows the benefit of where a very good change management process, structure, or professional is a real enabler. But I think touching on something you were just talking about there, Simon, and really around that kind of human and AI balance, or human and technology balance, which I think constantly we are coming back to in these conversations. Sophie, obviously being experienced in design in particular, how do you design teams to decide when automation should take the lead, or when actually the human moment is the most important?
Yeah, I think Max said it as well earlier, that being from a design background and leading a design team, we're inherently a very creative, human-focused function. And it can be quite jarring sometimes to embrace the new technologies or understand the right use cases of where you might let automation or AI lead, versus where we need to step up as humans and be the human in the part of the design process to make sure we're getting the right customer outcomes. I think, there's a couple of things that we like embedding into our teams, and I think this is pretty industry-wide, to be fair. But when we are looking at designing experiences, we look at the sort of core questions that will help us understand whether it's something that we can lean on automation, or whether we need to keep that sort of as a human designed process or a human designed experience. And we look at sort of what's the risk of us getting it wrong. If it's a high risk, don't rely on automation to do that. We look at the emotional load as well. Any sort of like sensitive or experiences or interactions with a customer where there is, a high level of emotion within it, something like a power of attorney process that you might have, or stepping into collections because you can't pay your bill. Those are the sorts of things where you need that human connection, and any sort of automation in there can really damage the sort of trust that you have with your customers and damage the experience that they have. But I guess the key thing for me is we have to look at what differentiates us in the market. And speaking on behalf of telco, I think there is a lot of, it can become a little bit homogenous, and people might say that each telco in the UK market is much of a muchness and just pick the one you fancy. So it's really important to us that we are differentiating in the areas that matter most, which for us is our brand identity and our ability to deliver good customer experiences. So it's those areas where we're less likely to look at automation and AI, and where we genuinely do need the creativity and I think Accenture described it in previous years as lunacy of a design team to create those fun, new, exciting experiences that build that brand loyalty. And I think, again, for us in telco, the human connection that we have, people are genuinely, there is an emotional connection to your phone. It is the way you stay connected. It is a part of your life. It's something that you never leave the house without. And that's the sort of brand identity that we try and get across. So when we are designing brand campaigns for Christmas, for example, that's not something that we would trust AI to design for us. We would want that to come from human emotion, and we would want that to come from our design team's creativity. And but I mean, on the flip side, there is loads of use cases where having AI in place and encouraging our teams to experiment with different things has led to us having more personalization, increased efficiency, and better customer experiences. So those sort of transactional things that you have to do with your phone, check my balance, top up my pay-as-you-go SIM, check my roaming plan that I've got on my device. Those sorts of things, when you allow AI to get involved and you have automation as the leads, can really help improve customers' lives, because it's about just making sure that you want something to work and we can make it work. Proactive network updates, for example. Hey, we know where you live, so we're going to let you know in advance that there's planned scheduled maintenance of your network at that time, so that the customer is informed. That doesn't need to be a human connection moment. So key thing for me is basically I encourage my team to play with AI, experiment with it, and then we use those questions that I talked about at the start to say, okay, this is where we think it's a good use case, but actually, no, this is where we need our humans leading the way.
And it sounds like a really smart approach, and also a real rationalization as to why, as we've talked about again a lot in this conversation, there is a human at the top of that decision chain making those key decisions about, actually, is this a job for AI? Is this a job for a person? And I suppose ultimately it almost doesn't matter who does what where, as long as we know what the key outcome is and it's achieved in the right way, delivering the right impact. And something you said about that homogenous concern that, all telecoms are becoming much of a muchness. I actually have that fear for all industries. If we were to go down this route of everything becoming AI delivered, digital platforms, streamless, super easy, frictionless, although I know we've said about keeping a bit of friction in there, but eventually, isn't everything going to become so vanilla that how do we differentiate? And it will all become a matter of either convenience or cost, because will brand loyalty be even a thing? And that's a concern that I hope is an unrealistic concern. I hope that it's fictitious, but it is something that sits in the back of my mind consistently. I don't know what anyone else's opinion is on that. Do you think we're running the risk of vanilla businesses all becoming much the same, or are we able to truly keep this humanity that we talk about?
I think there is an element of that. Somebody talked on it earlier. I think trust is still a major thing. And actually, we see longevity of major brands that have built up brand loyalty over time standing the course because customers like that level of trust and familiarity. Mm-hmm. I also personally think that as we start to use Gen AI even more, there is a level of skepticism and cynicism from the people using it. And if it is associated with a brand you trust, you might be likely to use it more rather than new brands that pop up out of nowhere and just are vanilla and look the same as everything else. I think trust is the big part here, where I'm going to be optimistic, Katie, and say that I think that there is still a place for that. And I don't think we are going to get to that place. But yeah, it's all about brand differentiation.
I hope so.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to end up in a world like that. I think, you know, brand loyalty comes from a lot of things, including customer experience. And throughout time, there have been businesses that have done customer experience very well. In fact, that has been their brand. And there have been businesses that have done customer experience very poorly, and they don't really care about it, or seemingly don't really care about it. And I think, yes, we have new technologies, we have AI that's going to help to improve things and make things better, but there will still always be businesses that use it effectively, and there will be businesses that use it ineffectively. I don't think that's going to change. So, you know, I can't see a place where customer experience and the way that it affects brands will become vanilla and the same across all businesses. I think it will always be up to businesses to decide how important customer experience is for their brand, and then how well they execute on that will drive what that looks like.
I hope so. And actually, the past few days of conversations already have struck, I suppose, an interesting chord in me, because once upon a time, not so long ago, if you started to talk about emotion or empathy in the boardroom or in certain rooms in the business, there would undoubtedly be some eye rolls and so on. It's intangible. We can't measure this. It's not the things that we are focusing on. And if anything, AI, this enhanced technology, I think has just elevated this conversation of emotion and empathy. And now it feels like we're taking it way more seriously than we were previously, yet it's all in context of a technological conversation. So I'm curious as to if you feel the same. Are you seeing a heightened discussion of empathy, emotional intelligence? Has it always been this way in the organizations that you work with? What are you seeing?
So I think actually at a certain level, AI is seen as like an efficiency, right? So we can get all these journeys done really, really quickly. And it means that we can reduce headcount. Don't need your design team, Max. We can just do all these journeys, right? And so the danger with that, and I think linking back to your previous question, Katie, around kind of what the pitfalls are with and assumptions are with using AI, I think actually sometimes it's almost the opposite, right? People see it as like an effectiveness thing, getting something to market quicker potentially, and sometimes they don't think about the things that we've all been speaking about, which is actually having that human input and making sure that we are thinking about empathy, we're thinking about the journey, we're thinking about what it means and where we want these users ultimately to get to. So I think actually sometimes it's almost the opposite. I've seen a bit of that, interestingly.
And I think in your industry, you are obviously you're very emotive when you talk about finance, money. It hits people in the stomach. So I think you do work in a very emotive industry as it stands. What about the flip side? So have you heard Sam Altman's views on AI and empathy, and how he believes that and this is actually from a few months ago, so the conversation may have changed, but he stated in a conversation with Adam Grant, the workplace psychologist, that AI has the ability to be more empathetic than humans. And he stated that very clearly. And his rationale behind it was not that AI is more empathetic, but that it has the ability to show empathetic traits, i.e., leave longer pauses for a person to speak, not interject with their own narcissism, because we all love to talk about ourselves, right? But AI doesn't care, doesn't interject that narcissism. And when we're talking about humanity, I wonder if there's a part in which AI can potentially be more human than a human. And I'll give you a little example. I was speaking to an agent of a company which I will not name the other day, and he repeated the exact same introduction script twice to me and didn't notice, like literally right after another. And we talked about error earlier and how there has to be a degree of error even with AI agents. But I suppose my point is, as people, we don't always get it right. And actually, can an AI be more fake human than a human?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, actually. And one of the things is, as Sam says, is it empathetic? It's not actually empathetic at all, because the AI feels nothing. And that's the actual advantage, I think, with some of these conversations. And we're probably not at a point yet where we're going to pass highly emotive people in a heightened state to an AI solution. But the options we do have is that we don't have something that feels something back. If you pass that over to a person in a contact center, and I was talking to an organization that deals with sort of subprime credit, when they're getting people called up in a state where they're in a state of distress, that passes on to the human who's dealing with that call. So not only are they trying to solve the problem, they're also trying to regulate their own emotions inside themselves. Now, there's things we can do now that I think work really well with that. And we sort of alluded to this earlier, is you can get the human to focus on the emotion side, and you can get the AI to focus on the factual side of it. You can help them prompt. But I think the interesting future is that we're going to see something that can start to display this. We can start to detect it, understand how to speak to that person, but will also hold its own personality and call all the way through it. I think that's quite exciting. Now, the interesting things we see about this, some of the sort of internal experimentation we've done, is to get that to work reliably doesn't necessarily offer you a real-time interaction yet. But it's definitely quite an exciting future in how we can start to sort of implement this to maybe improve customer outcomes. Now, the other thing I think we notice is when people are angry, they are angry because they're wanting to express something they feel inside, and they want to get it out. And sometimes they want to see that reflected in the effect they're having on the person they speak to. So this is going to be quite an interesting part of this, when we get a caller that might be in an angered state and they're speaking to a solution that understands them, tries to play some empathy, but doesn't react. So this is going to be quite an interesting thing, I think, to see. The last sort of thing we've heard recently as well is of an organization in Japan. And what they were actually using is not AI to replace customer service representatives, but what they would do is they would relay the conversation. So someone calls up, they're angry, they're abusive, but the AI solution understands that and speaks to the customer or the customer service agent in a calm voice and translates it back. So you're not actually relying on all of the sort of agentic decision making. You've still got a human saying everything, but you're just removing that barrier in the middle that might distress a human contact center agent. So there's a lot of interesting use cases for this. And I think as time goes by, we're going to not only have to adapt from a technical perspective, but as a society and how we deal with these.
Well, yeah, absolutely. It's societal, right? It's not just, we're not just talking business at the end of the day, it's human and human experiences. That's really interesting to hear about that Japan case study. And I think, yeah, as you say, we are constantly, even over the last couple of days, I've heard some amazing case studies. I don't know if anyone heard the JD Sports, Gavin Holland yesterday, but that was some really great innovative use of AI, which I certainly hadn't come across before. So I think we're constantly learning and constantly growing from this. Last question, again, to everybody here, and it's just a really broad, I suppose, personal perspective question. But do you think the way things are at the moment is humanizing AI at scale possible right now?
Maybe not alone.
You broke.
No, I just, that was my point before. I don't see it at the moment. It can humanize something, and as you just told, there's cases and there are stories about that it can feel humanized. But I still don't think it can handle everything, and I'm not sure I need it to be, autonomous, at least, if that's your point. I think it can help humanizing customer service in general. And we should also ask ourselves the question, do people want to talk to us, right? Or do they rather talk to a robot, because then they don't need to talk everything around it and to be something else, right? So maybe it's maybe the society just will change at some point, and we won't see the necessity of a human customer service, right? We will see a customer service that are effective, because that is what people mostly want.
Yeah, and it's, I think, a really important point that we must continue to make. What do people want? But equally, what do people want? There's not always a straightforward answer to that. Actually, it was Sam Altman again in this conversation, but he shared how when people knew they were talking to AI, because they were informed up front, then they were fine, they were happy with that. Where they didn't know they were talking to AI, they appreciated the service, had a fine service, but when they found out afterwards it was AI, they were not happy. So we might say we do not want AI, we want a person to speak to. But actually, if we had an AI solution and we didn't know it wasn't an AI solution necessarily, and I'm not saying we should do that, but I'm just saying we were quite happy with that alternative as well. So what do we even want as consumers? Do we know this yet?
I don't think consumers have a view on whether they want AI or they don't want AI. Do they only want to speak to a human or not? What consumers want, what I want, I mean, I'm a consumer, what I want is good service. If that good service comes from an AI agent, so be it. I'm happy that's absolutely fine with me. But I don't have a view on whether it should be AI or it should be a human. What I want is good service. So as long as the provider of that service to me can get it right, whether that's having human agents who are well trained and can deliver a good service, or having an AI agent that can do that instead of a human, I don't care. As long as it's good service. And I think that's really the ultimate crux of the matter, is people want good service. Where it comes from is irrelevant to them.
Good service, the right outcomes, positive impact, right? And I guess
it depends on the use case though as well, right? So if it's something that's really transactional, then AI makes sense and people aren't really going to have an issue with it. But if they want to talk to someone, think about it in the context of money at a bank, if they want to talk to someone about their finances, maybe they're in financial difficulty, maybe an AI bot isn't the right approach. They actually just want to talk to a human. So I think it also depends on the circumstances and where they are on kind of that like emotional scale, if you like, is that how they're currently feeling in that moment. And that can then determine perhaps what the right sort of approach is towards AI.
And I think that's always going to be the case, right? We're always going to have to continually analyze this and pivot and change and tweak and move as we progress. It's never going to be just a black and white, is it? But we are at time. So thank you so much for that, I think, provocative conversation. I hope the audience will take lots from that, and I hope it sparks more questions. And if it does, please direct your questions to everybody in the group, connect on LinkedIn. And as I said yesterday, just embrace this group of peers for the amazing skills, knowledge, and experience that is here. So thank you again so much for the panelists. I hope you enjoyed that session, and I hope to see some of you later on today.
Thanks, Kate.
Thank
Thanks
you
for hosting us.
Bye-bye.
Bye.